Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Marc Sniukas. Marc works on strategic innovation for new growth and renewal. Co-founder of the Business Model Gallery, the world's largest business model database, and adjunct professor of business innovation. He has authored several books, with the latest being The Art of Opportunity, which, Marc, it may not be the best book of the year. I don't know that. I'm not the judge of that. But in my honest opinion, it needs to be in the running for the best title of the year. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Could you tell the listeners, before we dive into The Art of Opportunity, what do you do outside of writing books? Do you got a real job or?
Yeah, sure, Dad. So most of my time these days is spent in consulting. So I work a lot with larger companies. I've done a lot of work with BMW, for example, on a global scale, on implementing new strategies, on supporting the transformation of their organization. So that's the bulk of what I do. And then now through the book, so before the book, I did a lot of research. I did research at Manchester Business School into how established companies design and implement new and possibly innovative business models. So that's also the one of the bases for the book. The book is a little bit larger in terms of the content, but that's where it all started, let's say. So based on the book now, there's a lot of speeches and workshops that we also do.
The Art of Opportunity, catchy title, okay? I mentioned that, but I think that says a lot just in its name only. I mean, but can you maybe put some, what's a business opportunity? I mean, can you kind of put a box around that for us?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the main question that the book tries to answer is, how can you find opportunities for new growth? And I would add to that, in a context where all the traditional strategies like selling more of the same, increasing your prices, or mergers and acquisitions don't work anymore. So we see a lot of companies, they have exhausted the traditional tactics of growing revenues and finding new growth. So the question is, where else do we go now, right? And so the Art of Opportunity is all about where can you find that opportunity for new growth? And we take people through the process of identifying non-customers, identifying underserved or unsatisfied customers, and then formulating and crafting the opportunity there. And then once you have the opportunity, it's all a question about how do you seize it, right? So we take a holistic approach to designing your strategy or your new venture, if you like. So it's all about crafting the offering, which we split up into, it's about the product, it's about the services, but it's also about the customer experience. It's about the business model, and it's about the revenue model. So this is how you then seize the opportunity by crafting a new business idea, if you like.
Could be used by startups, let's say, but maybe not so much, more for a mature company?
It was actually written for the mature company. So that's where I was interested in established companies. How do they pull something like this off? Obviously, at the end of the day, the methodology, it also explains how startups do it, and it also offers a path for startups. But it's not only for startups, let's say. It was really targeted at established incumbents.
So when you mention that idea of strategic innovation, is this again putting a box around your innovation, or is because we always think of innovation as kind of free spirited. What's strategic innovation? Maybe is the right question.
Yeah, right. So I mean, to me, there are two components to it. There is a more strategic approach to innovation. So you don't just innovate for the sake of innovating, or you don't innovate to have the next increment of your product, but you take a more strategic approach, which means that you answer strategic questions with your innovations, right? And the other way around, so to say, it's also applying a more innovative way on how you do strategy. So you go away from the traditional ways of strategy, kind of the generic strategies of you need to be either low cost, or you need to differentiate, or you need to focus on a niche. You go away from that and you find a new approach to answering the traditional strategic questions, let's say, of where to play, how to play, and how to win. So it's these both sides.
We're not throwing away the old, the Tracy Wisman, I think, type things where they... Yeah. But what we are doing, instead of maybe looking from the inside out, we're moving more to the outside to find opportunity in our innovation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a growing body of research that suggests if you start your innovations or your search for new innovations outside of the company with customers, you're going to end up with a product or an offering, an idea that has a higher degree of innovativeness and that is also more sustainable from a financial point of view. So there is more and more research that points toward that direction. Not to say that if you start internally you can't be successful, but just to say if you start externally, there is more opportunity and the potential and the likelihood that you're going to end up with something that is really innovative and financially more successful is higher than if you start internally with your product idea.
Well, I'm going to say, and this may be just a little bit, real basic, but I always term that we stop being the smartest person in the room and we leave the room be the smartest person or the market be the strongest person, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay. Well, the other subtitle of your book really is the part that caught my eye, because you talk about visual thinking. You put that in the forefront by making it part of the subtitle. That, to me, I kind of, when I think of visual thinking, I think of the guy sitting there putting the post-it notes on the wall and doing all that stuff and everything, okay? But is that really innovation, or is that just a workshop type thing? What is visual thinking to you?
We lean a little bit on design thinking here, and we borrow from design thinking principles. And it's about co-creation, so you get together, and it's just about the visual language or visualizing things helps you to focus a discussion on a common issue, let's say, instead of going through. So the alternative would be to go through an Excel sheet with a bunch of numbers, for example, right? So we say that if you apply visual techniques, that's going to help you to have a discussion on a common issue, to be on the same page. And it's going to be a lot more engaging and easier also than to communicate to your stakeholders, be it your boss or be it your customers, what you're talking about, than if you do this through a bunch of Excel sheets and a bunch of numbers. Well, so the book is very visual, right? So we have, we start already on the title being visual. We have a bunch of visual exercises in the book. We tried not only to make the book look good, but we also wanted to have visuals that help you to understand the concepts in an easier way.
Well, what I thought was really cool about your book is you started me out right at the very beginning, getting me on that visual path by saying, here's the reader's journey. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
And tell me what the reader's journey is, and then also add, can I go off the beaten path? Do I have to stay on that journey?
Well, so the reader's journey is basically an outline of the book, if you like. So we start with an introduction to, so what is that strategic innovation? Where does it come from? We actually start with a story of a German TV company that has achieved plus 100% growth within 5 years, and 50% of the new revenues, or the revenues actually, they come out of businesses that had not existed yet 2 years ago. So we go a little bit into that story, and we set the stage for explaining what it is that we're going to outline in the book. And we show in the book then how people can actually achieve that kind of growth. So that's the first step of your journey, so to say. And then we go into the second step is, how can you find opportunities? Where do you find opportunities? So we talk about all these different types of non-customers, of undersatisfied customers. We go a little bit into customer experience mapping, customer journeys, understanding your ecosystem. So having a good sense of where you are and where the opportunity is. And then in the third chapter, so that's the next stage, we go into crafting your strategy. So we talk about creating and designing your offerings, your products, your services, your customer experience. We talk about how to design the business model, and we offer various design themes and design patterns, so to say, on how you can reinvent your business model, reinvent a new business model. And then we go into the revenue model as well. So we talk about different types of revenue streams, of pricing mechanisms, all these things. And then in the next chapter, on the journey, the next step on the journey, we go into how can you then launch your new venture in the market. So we go away from that traditional strategy process, if you like, which is basically first you do an analysis, then you do a plan, and then you go implement the plan. So this draws heavily on the research that I did, where we came up with a new process that is a 3-stage process of inception, where you basically have a rough first idea, which you then validate in the market. Then you go into an evolution stage, which is more of an iterative You do something, you act, you learn what works, what doesn't work, and you use the insights gained to further design your strategy. And then as you go through a couple of these cycles of trying, the maturity of your strategy obviously goes up and it becomes more sophisticated up to a point where it works sufficiently well so you can roll it out on a larger scale, which means you move into what we called the diffusion phase, which is all about scaling it up. So that's the fourth chapter. And the fifth chapter is actually, we kind of wrap it up by having a look at the underlying principles of this whole journey. So what is the mindset that you would need in your team or your organization if you wanted to implement the art of opportunity, let's say. So that's basically the journey for the reader.
What stops the art of opportunity being, let's say, a repackaging of Osterwalder's business model canvas or the lean startup type thinking? I know that's the current mode of thinking, so I mean, there's certainly similarities, okay? But kind of explain that to the listeners, the differences and the nuances to all that.
In the business model generation, the Osterwalder book, we also draw on design thinking. So we use a little bit of that design thinking approach. What is a little bit different, though, is that, first of all, we have a slightly different definition of a business model. So in my research, I looked at more than 200 publications about talking about what is a business model, what is the purpose of the business model, what are the components of a business model, and basically you have like two streams or two schools of thought. There are those people who say, well, we need to have a very broad definition of a business model, and the business model includes revenue streams, for example. It includes the offering, it includes the partners, the customer, and everything. So the typical or the business model canvas for me would fall in that category of broader definitions of a business model. And on the other hand, you have the more narrow definitions. And the more narrow definitions, they basically say, well, the business model is actually the activity system of your company. So it's about what are the activities that you need to fulfill in order to be able to do your business. What are the resources and the skills and the capabilities you need to fulfill these activities, and who does it? Are we going to do it, or do we partner with others to fulfill these activities? And personally, I'm in favor of that more narrow definition, because I think you can separate it better from other types of strategic decisions. Like, for example, who is your customer and what is the product that you're selling are two strategic decisions that you can separate from the way you do business, which would then be the business models. If you think about Amazon, when they started off, they sold books. So the innovation was not in the product, right? And they sold the books in the US. So the innovation was not on the market side or the customer side, but the innovation was in the business model side, which was then only about how they did it and how they set up their business, doing it online instead of in the retail store. So in that sense, if you think about the business model, how we think about the business model as a third dimension to these strategic questions. So traditionally, we have a product market matrix, and we add the third dimension, which is a business model. So we have it a little bit narrower, which is then different to Osterwalder. When it comes to lean, what I saw in my research is that lean didn't explain everything that was going on in the data. So I had a look at what all these companies did, and I tried to make sense of all the activities they went through. And obviously, being trained in traditional strategy, I looked at where did the analysis happen, where did the planning happen, where did the implementation happen. But that didn't explain what was going on in the data. So I looked at it through a design thinking approach or a lean approach, and that too didn't explain the whole story. So there is, before you go into a lean, creating the minimal viable product, for example, and then you need to build it, you need to test, that's happening, but there is some stuff happening before, and these iterative cycles don't go on forever, so there is also stuff happening afterwards. So I think there is a little bit of an extension to these theories, if you like.
And I think that's a great synopsis of it. And one of the things, my argument's always been, and even the lean startup hasn't prevented this, we sink 90% of our money into the product, okay, or the service that we're offering. Then we jump in to put 10% what's left over into the marketing, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And does your book help in that area? Do you think it sets a better strategic direction?
It's a little bit broader in the perspective that we apply, because we're not only talking about the product or the service, but as I said, the whole customer experience and the business model and the revenue model. So it's not that focused in that sense. And then the other thing is also that I think or one of the feedbacks that we get is some of the stuff that's there is not new. I mean, other people have written about Blue Ocean Strategy, also writes about non-customers, for example. Other people have written extensively about customer journeys, for example. But one of the feedbacks we get is that people like the book so much because it provides them really an end-to-end process of how to put all these different theories and tools together to really solve a business challenge, which then is how to create new businesses for new growth from within established companies.
Would you say your book is meant for someone at the C-suite level? I mean, someone higher up there to create that has authority over the business model, let's say. And if it is, I don't picture them guys up there doing Post-it notes and everything. You have a lot of experience with larger companies. Does that really happen?
So, I mean, two thoughts to that. I think the first thing is executive sponsorship is really vital for doing something like this. So all the companies I've worked with, and also in the research, all the companies that were successful, they had executives that really believed in this, that said, we need to do this, and I'm going to push it forward, which doesn't necessarily mean that they are engaged in doing it on a day-to-day basis. So they probably delegate it to somebody. It's usually a more senior person who has maybe a small team working on this. So they would be the guys with the Post-its, I would say, and the canvases and so on. But executive sponsorship is very important to drive it forward. Yeah.
Can the book be useful to me at the micro level? I mean, can I use this for even like something as an event, or something at pretty basic levels? Can I get something out of it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's also what we do now. So we use it for education, for example, with graduate students also who have no idea of design thinking and little idea of strategy. We use it in leadership programs also with mid-level managers, just to get also that help them think about what it means to think like an entrepreneur, for example. Now, corporate entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship is a hot topic at the moment. If you want to be more entrepreneurial in your company, you need to teach people somehow what does it mean to think and act like an entrepreneur. And for me, the essence of that is all about discovering opportunities and thinking about how can we seize these opportunities. It also helps in that sense, so it doesn't have to be the top manager or the C-suite that reads the book, but it also, if your intention is to have the whole company being more entrepreneurial, then it can help you on every level, just to show people what it means to think and act like an entrepreneur.
Well, I think you should get away from that entrepreneur thing and say more opportunistic. It'll tie into your title better. What's your favorite part of the book? What part stood out to you?
Well, I like the crafting part very much. So where we talk about how do you design the offering, the business model, and the revenue model. I think that here we really offer a lot of cases. We offer a lot of examples of innovative ideas across these three dimensions, and we offer a lot of input that you can use, for example, in a workshop or when thinking about your model. We have lots of different options that you could just try out, and we call them sparks. So the idea is really that these things should be to spark your imagination. And we also have card decks that you can download from our website, theartofopportunity.net. You can download them, you can buy them ready printed as cards that you can use to spark your imagination. So I think that's for me, that's the core of the book, so to say.
What is that business model gallery? Okay, you call it the world's largest business model database. What is that? That's separate from the Art of Opportunity. I mean, can you explain that to me a little?
The business model gallery. So it's a database of business models where we actually use the business model canvas to describe the business models. And it's a separate project. It's something that a friend of mine who also did a PhD on business model innovation. So while doing all that research, we said, well, we came across so many business models and we have described so many business models. Why don't we commercialize them? So we saw an opportunity, right, to put together a database and showcase these business models and give people access to these business models.
Well, it looked like a lot of fun, and I thought you did a very nice job on both websites. Could you tell me about each of those websites and how to connect to them?
Yeah, so we have the book website is theartofopportunity.net. On the website, you have a bunch of downloads, so you can just register, you get the downloads for free. So basically, we have all the activities out of the book. So we have activities in the book like creating your growth brief, for example. So these double pages, you can download them from the website as a PDF, so you can use them in workshops, for example. You can download all these sparks that I talked about. We have some report out templates. So the idea was that once you have gone through this process, you need to report what is the opportunity and how are we going to seize it to somebody, the C-suite, for example. So we have templates for that, so you can have download to all of these things. You can download the first chapter for free, so to get a feeling what the book looked like and what it's all about. So that's the Art of Opportunity book, and then we have the businessmodelgallery.com. So it's www.businessmodelgallery.com. There too, you can sign up for free to get a feeling for it. You can have access to 5 models for free, and then we have different packages with different features, going from just having access to the models, being able to browse all the models, up to being able to compare various models, search more specifically about specific models, and we have also a quite large collection of what we call design themes. So around the 9 building blocks of the business model canvas, you can deep dive into, okay, for example, show me different ways to design a revenue model. Right? So we explain these different ways, and then we link back to cases. And currently, I think we have about 110 models live in the database, and we're going to add more in the future. So we're still kind of also experimenting with the site. So that's also an iterative cycle of finding the right packages and the right features. So it's also in constant development. But check it out. It's for free, so it's easy to check out.
Well, tell me about the best way to connect to both of them and learn about you is your own website.
Yeah, you can go to my own website, which is sniukas.com, SNIUKAS.com. That's kind of the platform. From there, you can go to the book site. You can go to the other books. You can go through other stuff that I have written, presentations, video of speeches, also videos of webinars about the book. So this is the starting point for my part of the web, let's say.
Okay. Well, I think it was excellently designed. I think you offered a great experience both in print and in, though I read it on Kindle, okay, but both as a book and also the websites to get around and find some very interesting things going on. Is there anything I did not ask that you might like to add?
Something I might mention is that next year we're going to do more open workshops. So we have some interesting stuff lined up here, and also in collaboration with other people that have written books that fit into the Art of Opportunity process. So we're, for example, planning an open workshop somewhere around March in the Bay Area, together with Jim Kalbach from Ural, who has written a book on customer experience mapping. So Jim is going to deep dive into how can you use customer experience mapping to discover your opportunities, for example. And we have a couple of these workshops lined up around the world, and we pretty soon we're going to announce them on the website. So around December, I would guess you can find the details there.
Well, I think that's awesome, Mark. I would like to congratulate you on your work. I think you did an excellent job. This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So I would like to thank all the listeners for listening.
Thank you, Joe.